So I'm pleased now to present James Mitchell. We got to hear him speak about intellectual property earlier, which was super interesting. And now he's going to talk about his company, which is called Oncodisc. James, we got 10 minutes for you, and I'm going to go ahead and start the clock now. So carry on.
Great. Thanks, Oren. It's great to be here. You know, about a week ago, my family and I were watching our hometown hero, Steph Curry, knock down 62 points in a game. And during the game, I saw a commercial for combination immunotherapy used for patients with metastatic lung cancer, direct-to-consumer marketing, and it showed a number of images, including pretty healthy appearing man out on his sailboat. And beyond what this says about access to care for people who don't have sailboats, it struck me that this is not my experience with patients with advanced lung cancer. And I would bet that for those in the audience who work in the emergency department, work in the ICU, this is more what you're used to seeing patients admitted to the hospital with any host of complications, maybe a post-obstructive pneumonia from their lung tumor. And so I'm James Mitchell. I'm a radiation oncologist. I have about 15 years of experience practicing clinical oncology. Also co-founder and CEO of Oncodisc, where it's our mission to build the ultimate remote early warning system for cancer care and address these unplanned hospital admissions that are very common in cancer patients. So if we look at the typical journey for a cancer patient, they're undergoing mostly outpatient treatment. 80% of cancer treatment today is delivered in the outpatient setting. That's multi-cycle immunotherapy, chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and during that time, mostly at home and unmonitored, yet at high risk of developing complications that lead to frequent unplanned hospital admissions, as well as sometimes stopping cancer treatment altogether. In fact, in the US alone, there are about 1.5 million urgent unplanned hospital admissions for cancer patients every year. These can cost up to $70,000 per patient. When a cancer patient ends up in the hospital, it's bad for everybody. Of course, the patient, they suffer quality of life, shortened survival, and they have to spend time away from their families. And for the oncologists, you know, we're largely working off of incomplete and subjective information during a patient's cancer treatment. We have to make critical decisions based on that incomplete picture. You know, we can sequence every genome, every base pair in a tumor genome, but we know distressingly little about what's actually happening to a patient day to day. And it's demoralizing and time-consuming to have patients in the hospital. For the hospitals themselves, you know, they're constantly judged on metrics and being paid based on those metrics, things like admissions to the emergency department in patients on chemotherapy. Of course, the payers. Every time someone gets admitted to the hospital, it hits the payer's bottom line. And then even for pharmaceutical companies, when we stop treatment, those are fewer products going for patient care. We also have data in oncology showing that very simple tools that keep patients connected to their oncology team can improve survival by up to 5 months. Patients with advanced cancer undergoing chemotherapy, this is a bigger survival benefit than a lot of new chemotherapy drugs. It keeps people out of the emergency department, and some activity tracking has been shown to predict survival. But when we look at some of the existing solutions like wearable technology, we find that adherence is just too low and falls during treatment. In fact, one study out of UCSF looking at Fitbit use in breast cancer patients showed 16% of patients never even charged their device. Only 44% actually used the device during chemotherapy. Now, every year, 17 million patients around the world are diagnosed with cancer, and 9.8 million of those require first-line immunotherapy or chemotherapy, and all 9.8 million of those would benefit from our technology. So our solution is the Oncodisc Remote Oncology Care Platform. It is sold to hospitals, health systems, and oncology practices on a per-patient seat subscription basis, generating 100% recurring revenue. And it consists of 3 aspects. There's a device, software, and data. Our device is the first of kind intelligent implantable vascular access port. Every day, cancer patients undergo implantation of vascular access ports so that they can get infusions of immunotherapy and chemotherapy. You can draw blood for lab testing. You can infuse contrast agents for PET-CT, MRI. But they largely just sit there inside the patient and don't do anything else during cancer treatment. We are developing the world's first intelligent implantable vascular access port that provides all of those vascular access needs while also monitoring patient physiology from inside the body. We're starting off by targeting common cancer-related complications, volume status, infection, pulmonary symptoms, by tracking temperature, heart rate, respiratory rate, and activity level, with plans for expanding features in the future. Our software not just manages the data coming off of the device, but also integrates critical patient-reported outcomes benefits in cancer care. And the doctor and nurse interface has virtual triage so that they can quickly know which patients need their attention and get on with their clinical day. But ultimately, the real value comes from the data and data analytic tools. For clinical care, data will unlock the ability to recognize complications early so that patients can be treated as outpatients and not have to be admitted to the hospital for common complications. This will be eventually grow into AI-driven analytic tools to be able to do this better than any individual doctor can, digesting all this information about their full panel of patients. And we will also develop data-driven risk profiles that will replace today's performance status, commonly used risk stratification tool in cancer care, which is unfortunately not that different from sticking your finger in the wind to predict the weather. Now, our data analytic tools will also provide valuable information for pharmaceutical companies and academic centers performing research studies and developing next generation of cancer treatment. Just to highlight a clinical scenario where the Oncodisc remote care platform can prevent a hospitalization, we know that very commonly cancer patients suffer volume depletion from nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. In this case, Rebecca is undergoing immunotherapy and chemotherapy for her lung cancer. And when she goes home, she develops nausea, vomiting, and diarrhea. She has decreased oral intake. And by day 7, she's starting to develop signs of volume depletion. She's getting an elevated heart rate, moving around less, but she's not developing a fever. Doesn't look like she's developing sepsis. So the platform recognizes these changes, sends her some targeted questions to answer, much like we're taking a history. And the care team is also alerted that there's been a change in her status, so we can intervene as an outpatient. Rather than sending her to the emergency department, we just bring her into the outpatient infusion center, treat her dehydration and her symptoms, send her home, and continue her cancer treatment uninterrupted. Now, we are integrating intelligent vascular access for a number of reasons. We are leveraging an existing procedure with existing reimbursement for the device. It integrates into the oncology workflow. Cancer patients require the vascular access anyways, and we will allow oncology practices to unlock remote patient monitoring reimbursement, which are largely unutilized in cancer care today. This is our team. Andy and I are both doctors, and we are the co-founders. We have prior startup experience as well. Teddy and Rajan, head of commercialization and operations, bring a combined 60 years of medical technology development commercialization experience. We're supported by oncologists around the country at leading academic and community centers. We filed our first IP in 2017, founded the company in 2018. We've raised $1.2 million in a prior round, which was largely supported by oncologists. We've developed hardware, firmware, and software proof of concept. We have performed multiple animal studies on those proof of concept devices. grant funding from the NSF, and we're part of the UCSF Rosenman Institute Accelerator and have also completed the MedTech Innovator Accelerator. We're currently raising funding to get through completion of development, pilot clinical usability testing, and 510(k) clearance. And for the future of Oncodisc, we have goals to become a comprehensive oncology data platform. We are a platform for next generation sensor technology with expansions into hemodynamic parameters such as central venous pressure, body and blood chemistry, and hematologic monitoring as well. And also indication expansion. We have IP that we've recently filed around additional connected vascular access technology with data generation for things like tunneled dialysis catheters and cardiovascular diseases.
Great.
So thank
James,
you for the
thank
time.
you so much. Yeah, thank you very much. That was a great presentation. You ran over a little bit, so we sucked into your question and answer time. I apologize for that. I didn't want to interrupt you. Judges, do we have some questions for James?
I was curious, it might be too early, but one of the things is if you're acquiring information, let's say that's 24/7, there's kind of an expectation of taking action on it, especially if it could cause an emergent kind of issue. Do you have a plan to sort of like provide some sort of overlay of services to enable sort of that remote patient monitoring and have the intervention that's needed at the point in time it's needed?
So the initial rollout will be with a partnership with the oncology practices that already have, they have on-call teams. We expect that we'll be setting the alert threshold such that there are not going to be endless constant alerts coming out of the system. It's going to be an intermittent thing that the practice will deal with. Now, as far as adding that service, that's a possibility for the future, but that won't be in our initial rollout.
Then quick follow-on for the price, do you see this as being in line with sort of the current access port pricing, or how much, or multiple of, or just a percentage of higher?
So the device itself will probably be about 2 times current average selling price of ports, which is still well within what hospitals are reimbursed, but we also unlock that remote patient monitoring piece. Right. So if you look at the holistic price and revenue for the hospital, on the back end, they actually make up more than that differential because of the remote patient monitoring recurring revenue.
Okay. Judges, any other questions?
Yeah, it's Gary. So I've listened to you present before. With the issue that I have is not a bad one. I'm trying to figure out if I compare this to the current portacath that a patient has, and now you're implanting this in a patient, and it's providing all of this data at care, which is, as we say, ambulatory is what we've heard. From your perspective, what is the downside of this? If there were a negative to this, what would it be?
So, as an oncologist myself, I think that the only real potential downside, which I don't really see it as a huge downside, is that, we are going to have to make sure that we have the workflow in place to manage the incoming data and manage the patients appropriately. So there will probably be a shift in some roles and responsibilities for the oncologist, for the oncology nursing staff, the nurse navigators. But I think once that shift is in place, then keeping patients out of the hospital will ultimately improve the efficiency of the oncology practice.
Great. And one second lead on to that would be, being now a venture capitalist for several years and investing in numerous device companies, what I'm learning more and more is we tend to look at companies as device companies, but in this digital revolution where we're collecting all this data that we've never had in a continuous model, do you view yourself not only as a device company, but more moving forward as a data analytics company based on all of that data you'll be collecting?
Absolutely, yes. So the vision for us is really to be a data and analytics company where we're unlocking insights about day-to-day patient care, cancer research, prognostic factors, all of the above, That's really the value. The device is a means of reliably gathering that data in an uninterrupted way that we just can't do with a wearable technology.
Great, thank you.
Okay. That's about all the time we have, James, so I'm going to stop us there for that. We do have several really great questions in the chat, so I encourage you to go and answer them there. I did want to just add that clinical trials, it seems like that would be a really great use case for the device. Our next presenter, so let's throw up the poll while we look at those chats. So go ahead, 1 is the worst, 5 is the best. We have 60 seconds to vote for James and Oncodisc. Our next